What if the love you crave isn't love at all, but a desperate attempt to avoid vanishing? What if every smile, every tender gesture, every ounce of kindness you've ever given wasn't a reflection of your soul, but a disguise, stitched together from expectations, survival, and a silent fear if you stop being useful, you'll stop being real? This is the tragedy of Vira, a girl raised in a world that never asked who she was, only what she could become. A society that praised perfection over personhood, where silence was grace, obedience was survival, and love was conditional. She wasn't taught to feel, only to perform. And when she found warmth in another, it wasn't freedom. It was a new prison. Katalina didn't just save her, she defined her. Vira's love was never romantic. It was a cry from a hollow place, one where the self had no shape or voice, only need. That need didn't fade, it twisted, until fixation blurred into something more terrifying. A self that can only survive in the reflection of another's gaze. I am afraid. I am afraid of what I know is in me, and what I cannot summon. Rainier Maria Rilke. Rilke's words haunt this story because Vira knows there's something broken inside of her, something unstable, hidden beneath the smile and noble posture. But she can't summon the strength to confront it, so she hides, behind her nightly duties, behind Katalina, behind the fantasy that love, if held tightly enough, can become an identity. But what happens when the one thing anchoring you begins to drift away? This isn't a video about Yandere tropes or anime archetypes. It's a descent into something deeply human, a portrait of someone who was never allowed to exist unless she was needed. A story of obsession, not as madness, but as survival. A tragedy shaped not by love, but by the absence of self. This is a story few dare to tell, even few are ready to understand. Because Vira was never crazy, she was just trying not to disappear. She's often called a yandere. This label sticks. It flatters trope-driven audiences, promising dangerous beauty, controlled madness, something easy to consume. But labels erase. They reduce the unbearable to something palatable. In Vira's case, they help ignore the unspoken. Yandere comes from the contradiction yanderu, meaning sick, dere, meaning affectionate. It implies love so deep it decays. In fiction, it's a trope. A girl smiling sweetly as she unravels. A lover who stabs for devotion. But obsession doesn't come from nowhere. It grows in deprivation, in instability. And a soul told early on that feeling had to be earned. Vira is textbook. Her fixation on Katalina borders on religious. Her diary reads more like a prayer than a memory. She's jealous, icy, possessive. But none of it is random. It's coping wrapped in elegance. What the audience calls a trope is a cry. What they call madness is often grief, unresolved and raw. Her behavior mirrors real-world psychological profiles, fear of abandonment, emotional extremes, an unstable sense of self, hallmarks of borderline personality disorder. Her identity is tethered to Katalina. Her very reality, dependent on being needed, resonates with traits of dependent personality disorder. Her obsessive rituals, her diary, her devotion, echoes of obsessive compulsive behavior, and beneath it all, trauma bonding. Katalina isn't just a person, she's a symbol of safety, of worth, of permission to exist. Yet we laugh. We meme her. Crazy but hot. Wife material if she doesn't kill you. Her tragedy becomes charm. Pain becomes aesthetic. We love our broken dolls if they shatter gracefully. But obsession isn't Vira's origin, it's her consequence. She wasn't born fractured. She was broken by a world that rewarded performance, punished vulnerability, and conditioned her to earn affection like a transaction. The obsession isn't how she began, it's what she became, because in her world, being needed was the only proof she was real. Before the obsession, there was the silence. Vira grew up in Albion's ceremonial walls, a society defined by image, order, and hierarchy. Emotion was a liability. Sadness, anger, longing, indulgent, weak. What mattered was discipline, perfection, control. Here, children weren't nurtured, they were sculpted. Vira was the perfect subject. She learned quickly. Falter and the warmth disappeared. Excellence brought her visibility. Usefulness earned her love. So she performed. And with each performance, she lost a piece of herself until almost nothing remained. Then came Katalina. To most, Katalina was just another night. To Vira, she was a miracle. She didn't demand perfection. She offered presence. She didn't critique, she listened. In a world where Vira was forged into a blade, Katalina let her become something softer, human. And in that single moment of unconditional attention, something inside Vira broke open. This wasn't romance. Not yet. It was hunger. Recognition without performance. And once felt, she couldn't let it go. Her identity didn't form around Katalina. It collapsed into her. From then on, everything Vira was became centered on being wanted. Her logic solidified. If I am good, I will be loved. If I fail, I will vanish. This isn't love. It's survival math. And once learned, it's nearly unshakable. Vira didn't fall too hard. She never learned how to love without fear. She didn't choose obsession. She was trained for it. Conditioned by a world that offered praise instead of care, structure instead of safety. Katalina became her exception and her everything. She isn't clinging to a person. She's clinging to the moment she first believed she mattered. There's a moment in trauma when the self stops growing and starts performing. For Vira, that moment came when she was granted a high-ranking position in Albion. On paper, it was everything one could aspire to. Recognition, prestige, status. But in truth, it was a throne built on conditions. A polished cage. To earn it, she had to erase everything that made her human. Fear? Silenced. Desire? Denied. Rage? Locked away. In its place, she wore a mask of grace and obedience, sculpted to fit Albion's hollow ideal. But perfection, when rooted in survival, is not real. It's a performance with a vanishing audience. Vira wasn't allowed to be a girl with grief or uncertainty. She was expected to be a symbol, revered, pristine, empty. The real Vira wasn't gone. She was buried beneath duty, chained beneath a performance sharpened by expectation. But the hunger remained, quiet, famished. Katalina, a friend, became something far more potent, an anchor. The one who had offered warmth became the axis around which the false self spun. Katalina represented everything Vira had been denied: love without measure, safety without condition. But she also represented the impossible, a person who could exist beyond the rules of Albion that was forced upon Vira. Vira didn't chase romance, she chased recognition. If the perfect knight chose her, saw her, then maybe she was real. Maybe she was enough. This was not love freely given. This was trauma-scripted devotion. Katalina became her lifeline, not just someone Vira admired, but the last thread tethering her to herself that she no longer recognized. This wasn't affection, it was survival, wearing the costume of love. There's a kind of love that doesn't heal. It clings, it consumes. It arises not from safety, but from scarcity. Vira's story is not about romance. It's about what happens when love becomes the only condition under which a person is allowed to exist. As her identity fused with Katalina's presence, the boundary between affection and annihilation began to blur. Without Katalina's gaze, there was no mirror. Without the mirror, no Vira. So she held tighter. Her bond wasn't about passion, it was about proof. Any change became a threat. Any rival, an existential danger. Luane flirts with Katalina, a threat. Gran or Jita show concern, a threat. Katalina steps away, the world crumbles. This is the autonomy of trauma-bonded obsession. When your sense of self is bound to another, their distance feels like death. Over time, love permeates into fear, and fear ostracizes into control. But Vira doesn't lash out because she wants dominance. She lashes out because she believes it's the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The more Vira clings, the more isolated she becomes, until her world has only one inhabitant. And when that one person becomes your entire reality, even love becomes dangerous. And beneath it all is a girl who only knew her worth when she was wanted. She doesn't want to control Katalina, she wants to avoid vanishing. Vira's fixation isn't just emotional, it's etched into her nervous system. Trauma reshapes the brain. In Vira's case, it rewired love into need, and need into a neurological loop. Her amygdala, the brain's fear sensor, has become hypervigilant. It doesn't just sense danger, it expects it. Interprets silence, distance, or hesitation not as discomfort but as abandonment. And with it comes the same cortisol flood as a life or death threat. And then there's oxytocin, the hormone of bonding. In safe environments, it fosters trust. But in trauma survivors, it turns every moment of connection into something sacred and addictive. Every glance, every word from Katalina becomes magnified, not by love, but by the brain's desperate desire for safety. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, where impulse control and logic reside, struggles to keep pace. Emotions surge too fast. Rational thought drowns. Her brain isn't malfunctioning, it's over-adapting. And deeper still, the default mode network, responsible for self-reflection and personal identity, is damaged. Vira has no stable internal world, no sense of I without an external anchor. Without Katalina, there is no censor. That's why she writes. Her diary isn't sentimental, it's existential, not a record of love, but of life. A chronicle that says, I mattered. I was real. Vira isn't simply obsessive. She is neurologically caught in a trauma loop where fear is mistaken for love and identity dissolves without validation. Her brain is not betraying her. It's doing what trauma taught it to do, survive. But the survival it offers comes with a terrible price. Memory should be an echo, something we revisit, something that grounds us. But for Vira, memory is a cage. Katalina doesn't just live in the past, she loops through the present like a refrain. This isn't nostalgia, it's trauma recall, where moments just don't linger, they dominate. When the only warmth you've ever received is fleeting, conditional, and rare, your mind clings. It clings to moments not because of what they were, but because of what they meant. You're seen. You're safe. You exist. Those moments don't fade, they fossilize. Vira's diary is not a fascination, it's a preservation, a talisman. Every entry is a thread stitching her together. Not because she loves Katalina, because she doesn't know who she is without her. To the outside world, it looks dramatic, excessive, but inside her mind, time doesn't march forward, it circles. Memory loops, and Katalina is always at the center. This is how trauma haunts. It isn't a ride like a monster, it ensnares you in a single moment, a moment that once made you feel whole, and then it refuses to let go. To call it obsession is too easy. Obsession suggests indulgence, choice. But Vira's fixation isn't chosen, it's survival. In a world where she was only praised for her utility, where identity was transactional and affection was scarce, Katalina became more than a person. She became a shelter, an emotional constant in a life that offered nothing else stable. What others interpret as romantic fixation, for Vira, a desperate psychological life raft. It is not a hyperbole, it's programming. Emotional logic shaped into isolation, validation must be earned. Love is not a right, but a reward. Her feelings for Katalina aren't the gentle throb of longing. They're the panic grips of someone terrified they'll disappear if they let go. So when Katalina drifts, emotionally, physically, or through the attention of others, Vira's world implodes. Her attachment reopens like a wound. Fear floods her mind. Longing wraps into possessiveness, panic, control. But it's never about power. It's about staying alive. These behaviors, jealousy, and even violence aren't signs of sadism. They're consequences, reflexes, the instinct of a mind holding on to the only thing that gives it shape. Obsession becomes her vocabulary, a language of preservation. Vira isn't irrational. She's responding exactly as the world taught her to, where love is tested and existence is earned. This is what happens when emotional starvation calcifies. For Vira, fixation isn't a flaw, it's the only thing keeping her afloat. When your world becomes one person, everyone else fades. For Vira, Katalina isn't just the center, she's the axis around which her world spins. So what happens when someone else reaches out? Vira's interactions beyond Katalina, Lowain, the crew, Narmaya, even Gran and Jita reveal a haunting portrait of emotional fragmentation. There's civility, even charm, but little connection. She knows how to speak, but not how to feel with others. Social grace without emotional weight. To Lowain, she offers open disdain. Not out of cartoonish jealousy, because his admiration reflects a freedom that she was never allowed. Where he is playful, she is clenched. His silliness reveals her unrelenting restraint, and the contrast only deepens her estrangement. With others, there are flickers of warmth, courtesy, the appearance of closeness, but it never lasts. Any real pressure, and the facade cracks. Her emotional compass has been magnified to a single pole, and everything outside of its field becomes incoherent. This isn't just simple dysfunction. It's a narrowing effect of trauma. Vira doesn't reject connection. She can't believe in it. Love, to her, must be earned. Relationships are ledgers, so even when offered freely, she braces for the cost. There's always a gap between word and feeling, between potential and permission. Her emotional energy isn't divided, it's monopolized, and that monopoly belongs to Katalina. There is a cruel irony beneath Vira's obsession. Somewhere inside of it, a yearning for autonomy still flickers. Her most violent acts, her possessiveness, her collapse into rage, are so often dismissed as madness or malice, but look closer and they speak something else. Attempts to stabilize emotional reality. Katalina isn't just someone she cherishes, she's the emotional scaffolding keeping Vira upright. To lose her is to risk total collapse. Letting go is not fear, It's annihilation. Vira clings, not out of control, but because she never learned selfhood. Somewhere deep inside, she knows that this isn't sustainable. She knows her actions aren't right. She feels the shame, the fracture, but she has no exit. Her awareness is fractured, not absent. And that's where the tragedy sharpens. Healing would mean facing the possibility that without Katalina, she is nothing, or worse, that she was never allowed to become anything. Her love is not romance, it's a lifeline. Her devotion is not about closeness, it's about coherence. And in holding on to something so desperately, she becomes the very thing she fears. Someone who cannot choose, someone defined by absence. She becomes a marionette, each threat pulled not by love, but by fear. Vira is not beyond change. She's simply terrified that change means watching herself disappear. Vira's collapse isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps quietly, insidious, unnoticed. By the time her mind fractures, identity has eroded. All that remains is performance. Smiles instead of screams. Elegance where there should be confession. Her inner world becomes a mirror shattered by presence, each shard reflecting something raw. Panic, need, rage, reverence. None of it forms a whole. And in Granblue Fantasy Versus, we see the cracks. Her eyes flicker, lively one moment, hollow the next. Under stress, they dull, lose light, lose shape. Her voice swings from graceful to frayed. Gentle speech sours into veiled threats. Her animations tell the rest. She stands too still, too sharp. If you idle too long against Katalina, she begins repeating Onesama in a ritualized and mechanical voice. Her taunt, bent low, grin wide, eyes obscured. This isn't confidence. It's unraveling. Her clashes with Luane expose the breaking point. Eyes turn lifeless, features contorted in fury. It's not hatred, it's detachment. She's no longer inside of her own body. These aren't theatrical breakdowns. They're implosions. Emotional regulation giving way to pure reflex. And yet she still smiles. She fights while begging for connection. She laughs without nothing left inside of her but silence. Her joy is strained static. Her poise, a phantom. This isn't villainy. It's the slow, agonizing death of a self that was never given permission to exist. Strip away the obsession, silence the fixation, and what remains of Vira? Beneath the intensity, there's someone else. A girl not defined by madness, but scarred by it. When unanchored from Katalina's gravitational pull, Vira reveals flickers of possibility. Calm, composed, quietly yearning for connection. She's intelligent, refined, commanding. Her speech is deliberate, touched with an elegance that does not require hysteria to be heard. As a leader in Albion, she displays poise and competence. People respect her, not because of her closeness to Katalina, but for her ability to lead, organize, and act decisively. These are not the actions of a madwoman. They are the signs of someone in another life who could have stood on her own. And then there are moments, fleeting, but they matter, where her walls lower. She smiles without tension. She listens. She responds. These glimpses reveal her humanity is not erased, only hidden, beneath fear, beneath longing, beneath the ache to be seen. These aren't contradictions, they're dualities. Vira's tragedy is not that obsession consumed her, it's that she never had a chance to live without it. Her Yandere traits are not her essence, they're her armor, forged in a loveless childhood, sharpened in a world that rewarded performance over personhood. And when the storm within her quiets, we see her, not a monster, not a trope, just someone who never learned how to be whole. There are names for the pain Vira carries, but none fully contain her. Borderline personality disorder is often invoked to describe characters like Vira, those haunted by abandonment, gripped by emotional extremes, caught between devotion and despair. Her emotional dependency and instability echo the familiar patterns. Dependent personality disorder, DPD, offers another lens. Vira's self-worth revolves around Katalina. She doesn't act independently. Her choices, her moods, her identity, they all orbit the person who ever made her feel whole. Then there's trauma-based dissociation. Her psyche splinters under the weight of loss and expectation. Manic devotion dissolves into eerie stillness, like someone vanishing while still standing there. In those moments, memory and emotion unravel. The world distorts. Vira recedes. What remains is survival instinct dressed in ritualized affection. But these diagnostic terms are not the point. This isn't about pathology, it's about understanding. These labels are not cages, they are maps. Not for judgment, but for empathy. Vira is no textbook case. She is a story not begging to be defined, but to be heard. There is a mirror in Vira's story, but it doesn't reflect. It reveals absence. Mirrors for her are not symbols of vanity. They are reminders. Each time she looks, she doesn't see who she is, only what's missing. The reflection doesn't lie. It simply fails to appear. Her identity, wrapped by conditional love and emotional starvation, cannot stabilize long enough to cast an image. This is the curse of being seen only when you're useful. You begin to wonder if you exist when no one else is watching. And beneath her story, myth murmurs. She echoes Lady Rokujo from the tale of Genji, a woman dignified and self-contained until longing consumes her, and her love becomes spirit. Like Rokujo, Vira is graceful until pain refuses to stay quiet. Medea clings to her story too, not as a villainess, but as an exile, betrayed and discarded, left only with magic and rage. Like Medea, Vira sacrifices everything for love, and in doing so, she becomes a weapon. Her brilliance turns sharp, her grief becomes language. Even Narcissus finds his way into her mirror, not in vanity, but in disappearance. He did not fall for himself, but for the only image he could find. Vira does the same, not in pursuit of romance, but in search of substance. She reflects herself against the only surface that doesn't shatter, Katalina. In each of these myths, we see people undone not by madness, but by absence, by longing unmet, love unreturned. Not monsters, just tragedies draped in grace. There are few fears more unbearable than vanishing, not physically, but psychologically. To wake up and feel unreal unless someone else confirms you. This is the terror that Vira embodies, not bloodlust, not rage, erasure. In most Yandere narratives, obsession is loud. The fear is obvious. Losing the beloved, eliminating the threat. But for Vira, the horror cuts deeper. It's not about what she loses, it's about what she becomes without it. Katalina isn't just a person she loves, she is a tether, a symbol, the fragile anchor holding her identity in place. Without her, the mirror finally cracks. And Vira isn't horrified by what she sees. She's haunted by the fact that there's nothing there. Her descent isn't theatrical. It's not a spectacle. She is admired, respected, capable of connection. That's what makes it tragic. Because even surrounded by people, her self dissolves. She doesn't just fear losing Katalina, she fears what's left after. And no one else can fill that void. Because Katalina wasn't just a light. She was the only proof that Vira could be loved at all, let alone stand on her own. This is the essence of Vira's horror. A self never given space to form, clinging to the only thing that ever made her feel real. The silence left in Katalina's absence isn't just lonely, it's lethal. In Granblue Versus, Vira's portrayal is subtle but devastating. She doesn't need gore or spectacle to unsettle. It's in the restraint, the polished elegance, the quiet unraveling behind every poised smile. This is not chaos, it's the performance of control masking collapse. From the moment she enters battle, her voice carries fragile steadiness, refined, polite, and even affectionate. But beneath each syllable lies tension, the trembling barely concealed. Her tone is too careful, too rehearsed, like someone performing the idea of being human. Her animations reinforce that fragility. Her grace is interrupted by flickers, moments where the mask begins to slip. Her taunts, especially with Katalina, become pleading, obsessive. Her smile stretches too wide. Her eyes glaze over, like glass barely containing the storm behind them. Those eyes tell the truth. In combat, they shift depending on her opponent. Against neutral characters, her gaze remains calm, composed, but clouded, with a lingering hollowness. Against rivals like Luane, her eyes lose detail entirely. They go glassy and unreadable, paired with furrowed brows and clipped tone. Hatred expressed not through rage, but coldness. But when she faces Katalina, everything softens. Her voice turns reverent. Her posture bends towards her. Her lines blend devotion with desperation. Her super move distills all of it, an elegant flourish that melts into manic energy. Her face cycling through longing, fury, joy, and anger. Not a fighter, a soul breaking in real time. Even when victorious, she rarely speaks with pride. Her wind quotes reflect emotional dissonance, directed not towards the fight, but towards others, toward herself. Her triumphs are hollow, as if no victory can fill the ache inside. Vira is not unhitched from the start. The tragedy is that she tries not to be. Her grace is not serenity, it's survival. A mask worn so well it looks like skin. And when it cracks, it doesn't explode, it bleeds. Her design hums with contradiction, between appearance and feeling, elegance and intensity, devotion and destruction. Her color palette is delicate, ivory whites, soft golds, and blood red accents. It speaks of nobility, refinement, and even restraint, but those hues also feel cold, empty. In contrast to Katalina's palettes, which glow with warmth, Vira's holds its breath. Her clothing is modest, regal, a lady's silhouette more than a warrior's armor, but that modesty conceals discomfort. She is dressed to be admired, not defended, built to be watched, not protected. Her eyes are her linchpin. When composed, they're too clear, over-sharpened, as if trying to stay focused in a world slipping away. But when obsession spikes, the detail vanishes, the light drains, they become vacant. Not madness, detachment. A visual metaphor for someone whose reflection no longer returns her gaze. Her posture tells a similar story. She holds herself formally, graceful, elegant, but her animations showcase aggression. The twitch of the shoulders, an unsettling grin, a stance that pulses with repressed tension. And her voice? Gentle when speaking to Katalina, crisp and cold with enemies, cracking during combat. Her voice actress doesn't just play a role, she unspools it, note by note, until the restraint collapses into rawness. Vira is not chaos. She is illusion of order, holding herself together in the silence before the storm. But Vira is also misunderstood. To many, she's just another crazy Yandere, a joke, a trope, a warning sign. Her obsession is reduced to a meme. Wide eyes, manic smile, unsettling charm. It's easier to laugh at her than just listen. The image is shallow and cruel. It strips her of her pain, her story, her context. It flattens complexity into caricature, and it echoes a wider cruelty. Vira didn't fall into obsession on her own. It was shaped, conditioned, built by a life where worth was measured in usefulness and love was only earned through perfection. So when people call her crazy, they're missing the horror. She's not terrifying because she's unstable. She's heartbreaking because she never had any other way to survive. Her fixation isn't thrilling. It's the language of someone clinging to visibility. What makes it more tragic is the fact that she knows. Vira isn't lost in a fantasy. She's painfully and brutally aware that she isn't right in the head. She holds herself together with trembling grace because falling apart would mean losing everything. The horror of Vira is not in her actions. It's about how much she hides. This isn't an excuse. It's an invitation to understand her, not to worship her, not to romanticize her, just to see her. Because sometimes the most unsettling thing about a character is how much they're trying to survive the moment you turn them into a punchline. Beneath the obsession, there is a girl, not a monster, not a meme. You strip away the spiraling fixation, and something quieter remains, something we often forget in the noise. Vira isn't always unraveling. There are moments of clarity, of peace, of strength. When the storm isn't closing in, she leads, speaks with poise, carries herself with weight and precision of someone respected, trusted. Her brilliance and strategy, her grace under pressure, her loyalty. These things are not products of instability. They were proof of potential. And then there are glimpses, brief but vital, when she talks to others not out of need, but care, where her words offer comfort, insight, and even warmth. In those moments, the mask doesn't crack. It lifts. And what peers through isn't threatening. It's human. Her so-called madness isn't a contradiction. It's distortion. A survival instinct layered over something that might have been whole. She didn't choose obsession. She was taught to fear invincibility, to equate being needed with being real. Her madness is not infection. It's a scar. And scars are proof that she survived something. That's her tragedy. Not her violence, but the possibility she could have been something else. Something more. There is a version of Vira, grounded, self-aware, even joyful, that the world never gave space to grow. And when we speak of her, we must speak of both, the fractured reflection and the girl waiting behind the glass. Because her story was never about instability, it was about what might have been, if someone had just told her she didn't have to be perfect just to be loved. She was never allowed to be whole. That is a tragedy we have uncovered. Vira wasn't broken. She was shaped into someone acceptable, a perfect heir, a graceful subordinate, a reflection of someone else's dream. In a world where love followed obedience and safety required submission, she learned to disappear just to be seen. It wasn't romance. It wasn't madness. It was survival in a life where existence itself was conditional. What is hell? I maintain that his suffering of being unable to love. Fyodor Dostoevsky's words capture what Vira could never voice aloud. She wanted to be loved, desperately, but all she ever had known was shifting conditions, hollow affection, and the terror of abandonment. She didn't crave romance. She clung to Katalina because without her, there was no one left to reflect her. No shape, no sound, just silence. She's not evil. She's not monstrous. She's just lost. We treat characters like Vira as punchlines, archetypes, but they reflect something real. The unbearable grief of never knowing how to be loved without performance. Beneath all that lies a girl who is misunderstood. Not a villain, not a trope, but a product of the very system she serves. If this journey through loss, trauma, and identity stirs something in you, you're not alone. There are many stories like this, more ghosts waiting to be heard. And in the end, maybe that's the question that Vira's story leaves behind. How much of yourself were you willing to trade just to be loved back?